Welcome back to Cryptid Mysterious. I'm Joe, and I'm glad to have you stop by. Today's Bigfoot encounter comes to us out of the state of Illinois. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, I'd greatly appreciate it if you'd smash that for me. Let's get into today's story. My buddy and I were set up in a clearing that abutted a large tract of woodland in northern Illinois. This was one of our favorite areas to bang out a couple of coyotes every now and then. About 45 minutes before daylight would be gone, we heard the varmints howling in the woods to our north. My partner had the call in hand and started to work what is known as the dying rabbit. The sound of a dying rabbit is irresistible to the coyotes. It never fails to bring them in. David was calling about every 2 or 3 minutes with little time in the day, but we knew they were nearby. Our truck was parked about a quarter-mile away from our position, and we were in full camo, sitting against a clump of trees and bramble about 40 yards into the field of grass, away from the main wood line. As Dave continued to make the call, we started to see a couple of heads popping up from the grass. A total of 4 coyotes began trotting toward what they suspected was a late afternoon snack, heading directly toward us. The two of us raised our beads into position for a takedown when the unexpected happened. The coyotes hit their brakes, raised their heads, and out of the woods to our east, a huge Bigfoot came tearing out of the trees, heading right for them. The coyotes immediately started to hightail it to our west, running through the field and heading for the cover of the trees. We could immediately tell that at least one of them wouldn't stand a chance of escaping. The Bigfoot ran across the field in a forward lean, and it had to have been covering the ground 3 times faster than the coyotes. Just before the coyotes could make the woodline, the monster dove toward them. We heard a loud cat-like squeal, followed by silence. We sat in our position, stunned. The spectacle that was unfolding before our eyes was mind-blowing. The Bigfoot arose to his feet. With a coyote in hand, we could see it manipulating the dead creature while it stood in the field. This coyote, by the way, was 60 or 70 pounds, but in the hands of this beast, it looked like it was a rabbit. That's how big this monster's hands and arms were. We ducked down low as the creature turned to slowly walk back across the field in the direction it came from, eventually disappearing into the timber. As you can imagine, this was an unbelievable sighting in any man's book. In hindsight, one of the most frightening aspects was that we'd been sitting there making calls for about 3 hours before anything happened. We were now left wondering if we'd actually been calling in this Bigfoot, who happened to be closing in on our position when the coyotes showed up. I guess we could thank God for sending the coyotes, because the Bigfoot had come out of the trees only maybe 80 yards from where we sat, and it could have been on top of us before we could react. This Bigfoot appeared to be moving as fast as a speeding 4x4 across the field. There's no way to really judge how fast, other than estimating about 40 miles per hour. The coyotes were at a complete disadvantage in the tall grass and brambles, not to mention the fallen trees and patches of brush throughout the field that they had to navigate through as they ran. The Bigfoot, on the other hand, just took a straight line sprint, clearing everything and anything in its path at high speed. It was absolutely incredible to watch. After the kill was made and the creature had left, the two of us did not venture out into the field where the incident had occurred. We were quite happy to get out of there with our shirts still on our backs. The creature was everything that we all had seen and heard about. It had to have been every bit of 8 or 9 feet or more and looked like a brick shithouse on legs when it ran across the field. When it had committed to the dive for its prey, it launched itself like a ball player stealing second. We heard a brief yelp or screeching sound as the coyote met its demise, and then it was all over. After we made it back to the truck, the two of us were talking about the dive for the kill, and thought it actually made a lot of sense. We thought about the alternative options available to a huge beast trying to reach down in an effort to grab a small, evasive creature. To us, it would be like you or I trying to catch a mouse with our hand while running around in the house. It would be virtually impossible. I think the same thing is true for them when they're hunting smaller game. They simply commit themselves on the fly and dive, landing on the prey and dispatching it quickly. If this thing landed in a body slam on anything, it would not be getting up anytime soon. We had to have been looking at a beast that weighed 1,500 pounds or better. When it went airborne, it was fully extended and had to have been some 16 feet long in the air. It looked like my duck hunting boat flying through the air. As it walked away with the coyote in its clutches, it held it like we would hold a bunch of bananas. And this thing was a 60 or 70 pound animal. It never turned to look in our direction, so we were unknown by it the whole time. So we thought. Its fur, or should I say hair, was long and shaggy looking. It was more reddish colored than anything else, but with a healthy mix of brown. At the distance we watched from, the arms on this thing looked like sections of a tree trunk hanging from its shoulders. If it was to get its hands on you or I, there would be no chance of escaping its grasp. Well, guys, that was a pretty wild one. Imagine that calling in coyotes, and then you see one of those things coming in after them. How did it not know the guys were there? Or maybe it did. It just didn't. It knew what the guys were doing, maybe. It didn't want the guys. It wanted what the guys were calling in. These things are seemingly pretty smart. Well, appreciate you all tuning in. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button for me. And where are you watching from? Love to know. And if you've had an encounter with any of these guys, or anything mysterious for that matter, I'd love to hear about it. Shoot me an email at cryptidmysterious@gmail.com, and I'll see you in the next one.